Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Jennifer Schaus and Associates in our complimentary webinar series for U.S. federal government contractors. We're coming to you live from Washington, D.C. today. This webinar series will run for 15 weeks or on 15 Wednesdays as we cover subcontracting opportunities within each of the 15 departments. As usual, all of our webinars are complimentary. You can find the schedule, registration links, and the recordings on our website under the subcontracting section. Our data partner each week is GovSpend, formerly FedMind, and our legal perspective will be covered by a rotating government contracts attorney each Wednesday. So a little bit more about us. As you can see on the slide, we provide the following services for federal contractors, including product, service, and software firms across the globe. You can find more information about us on our website. Our webinars and newsletters reach a vast array of federal contractors, and our YouTube channel now has almost 600 complimentary webinars, and we're adding to that number every week. So please follow our channel and give our videos a like or a comment. And we also have advertising opportunities, including in this series. So if your organization is interested in reaching federal contractors, you can sponsor an event, our webinars, advertise in our newsletter, or have us post your promotional information on LinkedIn. So contact us at hello@jenniferschaus.com for pricing and for our media kit. And the email there is right down below. Please note we've added a procurement playbook webinar on doing business with the NSA. This will be a live webinar only and will not be recorded. The slides won't be available afterwards, so don't miss this rare opportunity to participate. And the government speaker will be taking audience questions during the webinar, so definitely a great opportunity. This will be on Friday, October 21st at 12 p.m. This is 12 p.m. Eastern, and we really hope that you can join us. Now we'd like to take a quick moment to personally thank the organizations that help make this series possible. Special thanks to Tom Johnson and the team at Set Aside Alert for posting this webinar series in their newsletter. Please visit setasidealert.com to learn more about their services for small businesses. Additionally, we'd like to thank GovEvents and also Fairfax County for sharing this webinar series on their public calendars. Please visit their websites and calendars for other related events. And now we would like to thank the Virginia PTAC. Virginia PTAC is based out of GMU in Fairfax, and it offers free one-on-one counseling on federal, state, and local procurement topics. Online resources and group trainings are free with no restriction on your business location. So if you're interested in learning more, please use the links provided to connect with the PTAC. Also, thanks to our friends at BidSpeed, the BidSpeed platform helps you win and increase your probability of winning government contracts. They have opportunities from every federal, state, and local public source in the United States. So if you're looking for a compliance matrix, a proposal template, a strategic teaming partner, or details on an expiring contract, BidSpeed can help. BidSpeed is an official partner of the SBA's 7J Management and Technical Assistance Program. Contact BidSpeed at the email or phone number here to learn more. Next, we'd like to thank Gov White Papers, an online resource for content. Gov White Papers is a free knowledge hub for the public sector and supporting industries to find, post, and promote government and military-related content. Explore B2G advertising solutions with our team of expert government marketers so you can connect with public sector decision makers. Promotional opportunities include lead generation, display ads, white label content creation, email marketing, and more. Browse thousands of free white papers, ebooks, case studies, and more to stay informed on topics like energy, defense, economy, healthcare, technology, and education. Plus, upload your content for free to boost website traffic and exposure in the government community. Join Gov White Papers today to get started. And lastly, we'd like to thank Government Marketing University. They're hosting GAIN. So GAIN is the premier business to government conference that brings together the brightest minds in the community. Government Marketing University's goal is to help attendees grow their government marketing wisdom, accelerate connecting with their target government audience by learning new trends and techniques, innovate annual strategy, tactics, and tools, and network to build personal brand and professional network. The agenda is focused on training, research insights, networking, and members-only experiences to help you boost your brand. Government Marketing University is ready to welcome you at the Capital One Hall in Tyson's Corner or virtually on October 18th, so you can register today at www.thegainconference.com. All right, so today we're all here to dig into subcontracting opportunities at the Department of Health and Human Services. So let's take a quick look at our agenda. As you can see, we're going to start with panelist introductions and close out with legal insights. So our first panelist today is Ms. Archisa Meehan, and she's representing GovSpend. GovSpend is the go-to resource for finding federal contracting opportunities. Please contact Archisa for more information about the GovSpend platform. Thank you, Archisa, for being with us as always.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And our legal speaker today is Janae Ani, and she's from the firm Stinson. Thank you, Janae.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll kick this off first with the mission statement from the Department of Health and Human Services. I won't read it off to you there, but we've highlighted some keywords. So it's always important that we keep in mind the mission statement so we can really understand the contracting trends for each department. And then I'd like to draw your attention here to the various agencies and services within the Department of Health and Human Services. You should spend some more time on each of these services websites just to learn more about each specific role and mission. And then here are just some important links as well. The link to the main department website, as well as the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. And then we also encourage you to look at the procurement forecast to understand what the department is buying, when they're buying it, how much they're buying, and if any specific set aside or contract vehicle may be used. And then lastly, there's the link to the SBA scorecard, which can help you understand the small business contracting trends and what dollars are being won by women, veterans, hub zone firms, and other disadvantaged businesses. So now let's take a look at the top 10 vendors for the department. Here's the list. I won't be going through these because in just a second, Archisa will be taking us through the top 5. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Archisa.
Perfect. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Archisa Meehan, and I'm the director of the federal go-to-market at GovSpend and FedMine. And today we're going to just be focused on talking about subcontracting and how companies can use the subcontracting data and create a subcontract plan successfully for them as part of their growth strategy. I always like to take a couple of seconds to cover the data. So when you see the data that we're presenting for the prime contracts, that comes from FPDS, which is the authoritative source for all prime contract data. We do get the subcontract data from USA Spending. That data is self-reported by primes and I believe subs in the FSRS system, which basically feeds into USA Spending. Typically, the federal government and the SBA, when they're looking at goals, is looking at another database called ESRS. However, that data set is not made public. So I wish they did, but it's not at this point. So as we go through the slides and the information, the question that we always think about is how do we use the data that is made available? As a small business, we always want to understand who are the top primes that are winning the contract. What is the type of work that they're doing? Who are they working with? Not just within the agency, but are there any subcontract requirements? That data actually is part of the transactional detail if there is a subcontract plan requirement. And then what we've seen is that the most successful companies are the ones that are actually filtering the results or creating searches based on their keywords. Keywords, NAICS codes, socioeconomic status, vehicles, things like that. So we of course want to understand who are the top companies, which Madeline went through the top 10. So, so we can, and then further we delve into the details of those companies. Now, what we're going to go over is generic top companies within HHS. Of course, the results would differ the minute you start putting in keywords or NAICS codes. So I do want to make sure that, I mentioned that. And for those who know me, know that I am a big proponent of using keywords and NAICS codes, combinations or categories. So thank you. So the first company that we're going to talk about is Merck. You have their website right up there. Next slide. You have the link to register as a small business vendor or supplier at Merck. So next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, as you can see, over the past 4 years, Merck has basically been working at HHS. 2022 was a good year for them, having touched $2.1 million within HHS. The Army numbers will definitely go up. Keep in mind DoD has a 90-day delay before making their contracts public, so you could see that reflected. Within Merck, within HHS, you could see that Merck is typically working with CDC, as also in the past has worked with the Office of Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response. That's where you see some of the stockpiles and things that that agency takes care of. But otherwise, CDC is their prime agency that they work with, or bureau that they work with. Let's go to the next slide. And if I go into contract descriptions, you could see that what Merck's really been doing is supplying the vaccines for children as also for adults. And you could also see that they've won some contracts for storage and rotation. So always keep that in mind. You can also see further, I just did a little screenshot when I went through the contracts. There is a subcontract plan requirement within these contracts that Merck has. However, that description's not being made public. That is, it's not reported in FSRS or USA spending, at least at the time of doing this presentation. So, but when you decide that you want to have a conversation with Merck and you go prepared, it always helps to know that, there is a subcontract plan requirement for the contract. You can also see that in the past, Merck has received a couple of subcontracts, some time ago from Chemonix, but recently from the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative. So again, this is the level of transparency that is available. And we want to use this information as we create a strategy for subcontracting, understand the companies that we want to talk with, understand who they might be already working with and what type of contracts that they have that might need a subcontractor or have a subcontract plan requirement. So the next company is Rapid Deployment, Inc. Next slide. This is the link to register or get some information for being a small business vendor or work with the company. Next slide. So again, with this specific company, you can see that HHS is the prime agency that they work with. In FY22, it accounted for all of their sales contracts of $1.7 billion. Within this agency, within the HHS, the contracts that they receive are mainly with the Administration for Children and Families. They did receive a little bit from the Office of Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, but it's a smaller percent. Let's go to the next slide. In terms of the work that they do, it's really to complement of services to care for, facility setup, maintenance, things of that nature. There's another contract that they received because remember, this is data for FY22 ending on contract, HVAC and generator rentals. So that was interesting. And you could also see that in this contract, there is no subcontract plan requirement. However, that does not mean that you do not have an opportunity to talk to this company to see if they could be possibly looking for partners and subcontractors that they could work with. So keep that in mind. We've seen many instances of subcontractors being reported even when there isn't a plan requirement. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. The third company is Pfizer. We all know Pfizer. Next slide. Here is a link for you to register as a small business vendor. Next slide. So when we look at Pfizer and you see the contracts that they have won specifically in FY21 and 22, it's, the Army is definitely one of their largest clients. However, you can see that they, within HHS, while FY21 only accounted for less than $800 million of contracts, this fiscal year, last FY22, they won $1.3 billion, specifically with CDC, a little bit with ASPR, but specifically CDC is their primary client. Let's go to the next slide. You can also further go in and see that most of these contracts are for vaccines. Next slide. And I'm pretty sure if you go into details, a lot of them have subcontract plan requirements. So keep that in mind. The fourth largest top company in FY22 at HHS was Endeavors, Family Endeavors, Inc. Here is their contact us page. Next slide. And you can again see that for this specific company, it is HHS and a little bit with Homeland are their primary clients. And within HHS, they are working with the Administration for Children and Families, and seems that they are taking or they are in charge of the care facility sites in Texas and other places. So, and housing management, behavioral health services, those are the types of services that they're providing at the agency. Next slide. And I've given you a little bit of details on some of these contracts. You could see that some of them are sole sources. And then there is typically in one of their larger contracts with the Administration for Children, Families, there is a subcontract plan requirement. However, there's another one that's for housing case management, medical services that does not have a subcontract plan requirement. But again, keep in mind as you're creating these relationships with the primes, they don't necessarily have to have a subcontract plan requirement to work with other companies. For us, it's really looking at what the company is doing and if there's a way for us to assist them in the contract requirements and use that as creating and helping you win some business as a subcontractor. And I think the next company is our last company, which is GlaxoSmithKline. Next slide. Here is a link to register as a supplier, small business vendor for Glaxo. Next slide. So this one, you can see that they have won large amounts of contracts, specifically in FY22, from CDC and the Office of Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response. And otherwise, year over year, you can see that they work with other agencies, including Homeland and Army and Department of State. So, just to give you a quick look. Next slide. Again, a lot of these are vaccines for children. There is, also they are they do supply the influenza vaccine. So keep that in mind as you're going through these details. Next slide. And again, these are just some of the contract. I took some contract numbers, and you can see that some of them have a commercial subcontract plan requirement. However, you might come across a couple or a specific task order that does not have that requirement. So again, just means that you can it yet means that you can work with these organizations too. Next slide. And I think that is the end of my presentation. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, email me, or reach out to me on LinkedIn. And Madeline, I'm going to give it back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Archisa, as always, for all of your great insights into the data, and of course for your time. So now I'm going to quickly go through some marketing best practices. So we've listed here the basics for marketing your services to the top primes. Most importantly, you should use the tools available on sam.gov or the GovSpend platform to conduct research on the primes and the expiring contracts. Use the primes website, their newsletter and events calendars, and their social media. Learn as much as you can about them before connecting. And then once you have done all of that background research, connect and set yourself apart. Lead with your capabilities, not your socioeconomic status, and bring a specific opportunity to the prime. Work with the SBLOs, the small business liaison officers. They're your advocates. So we've listed all of those links in the slides to help you connect with them. All right, and now we're going to go over legal considerations and best practices. Please note that we've covered the federal acquisition regulations on the Department of Health and Human Services earlier this year. They were actually covered by our speaker today, so you can listen to Janae and find that recording on our YouTube channel as well. So Janae, I'm going to hand it off to you. Please just let me know when you're ready for the next slide.
Okay, thank you, Madeline. Hello, everyone. As she said, my name is Janae Ani. I'm with Stinson LLP. I'm in our Minneapolis office, but we have offices around the country, and I'm on a team that works on government contracting and government investigations, so we can provide a lot of assistance and help if needed. You can go to the next slide. So I'm going to be talking about the legal perspective of subcontracting with HHS, and I want to start with a few overall, just general best practices. Not all of these are specific to HHS, but some are. So first and foremost, one that isn't even on the slide because it seems very obvious, but it is arguably the most important, is to read the subcontract and understand the subcontract. Both of those are needed, reading and understanding. Subcontracts can be overwhelming, they can be beastly, they can be big, but they are incredibly important. Within them, within the provisions and the clauses, they can have limitations of liabilities for both the subcontractor and the prime contractor. They can have assumption of risk shifting. They can have material requirements like the Buy American Act, which may apply to subcontracts and may apply to where subcontractors are getting their products and sources from. They can have preference requirements, which is very important within the context of HHS because, as you saw on the list of agencies, there are some agencies that are specific to types of groups of people, like the Small Business Association, the Indian Preference Program, and the like. And within the HHSAR, which is the supplement to the FAR for HHS, there are different requirements for those different preference programs or specified requirements in those areas. So it can have those in them. And finally, it can have a lot of reporting requirements as a subcontractor. And again, within the context of HHS, when the prime contract or the subcontract receives funds from the Prevention and Public Health Fund or the PPHF fund, there are a number of requirements, specifically reporting requirements, that come with that. So it is very important to read the subcontract, understand what it is requiring of you or what you are expected to comply with. And if you read it and you're not sure of what exactly what you're reading means, it's very important to get someone who can help you understand that before you start working on it, because the costs of non-compliance are huge. So that's the first one. The second one is knowing your ability to negotiate. And just like the first, this is not just specific to HHS contracts, but subcontracts in general. I have experience working with both prime and subcontractors, and oftentimes primes will want to flow down as many clauses, which I'll talk about later, to the subcontractors because those clauses shift liability of compliance. But it's important as a subcontractor to know that not all clauses that a prime will want to flow down to you are required to be flown down to you, if that makes sense. So going into it knowing, and I'll get into kind of how you can know what's required, what's not. That's very important, because then you can go in knowing, okay, I can negotiate on this requirement, or I can't negotiate on that requirement, and you don't have to go in just accepting everything blind. Next slide, please. The next best practice has been mentioned a couple of times, is the HHS subcontracting plan. Now, generally, this is very general. There are exceptions, as we saw. These subcontracting plans are required if the cost of the contract may exceed either $700,000 or $1.5 million for construction contracts. And there is a template available from HHS. I've linked it there. However, primes don't have to use this exact template. They can use their own, but their own template must have the same information as the HHS template. So if you look at this HHS one, you can get an idea of what to expect from the other subcontracting plans. And it's really important to know, if you think or you know that the contract will exceed these thresholds, it's important to try your best to get this subcontracting plan. Like we said, you can contact the prime, you can contact the company. Maybe you've worked with them before, so you have a previous one. But these are very important. There's a lot of information in these, like how much money is allotted to specific subcontracts, what costs have already been or have not already been included, what types of subcontractors are being expected to receive the award. They can have information on particular programs being utilized. That is especially important in the context of HHS, because there are some projects that are conducted either on Indian grounds or subject to the Indian Preference Program, which I'll mention later, and also contracts that involve human research subjects. And those are just a couple that carry very specific and unique elements that can make subcontracting within those programs a little bit more unique, not difficult, I wouldn't say, but unique. So knowing that those programs are at play is very important. Looking at these and seeing what you'll be likely subject to can do a number of things. It can help you prepare your proposal to put items that you already know will be required. You can put those in there, show that you're ready, you're prepared, you know what you're doing. And it can also help you prepare yourself and your employees to know what you're going to have to comply with if there are certain changes or business models that you need to alter in order to be ready to perform that subcontract. Next slide, please. So getting into some of the FAR flow down clauses, I mentioned these earlier, just very high level overview. Flow down clauses are those clauses in the FAR, and there's a few within the HHSAR, which is the HHS supplement, that a prime must, can, or may flow down to subcontractors depending on a number of different items. Like I said, they can be mandatory for every subcontract. They can be mandatory as applicable, meaning if you hit a certain threshold, or if there's a certain type of project going on, then they're required, or they can be fully optional. And what they are, whether they're mandatory or optional, really depends on the kind of contract, different thresholds, what agency, what department, a number of things. These clauses act as kind of a balance or a portion of risk mechanism. What I mean by that is if a clause has a mandatory flow down, meaning no matter what, the prime has to flow that clause down to the subcontractor, and the prime does not, then the prime is liable if the subcontractor does not comply with that particular clause. Now, if it's mandatory and the prime does flow it down, that shifts the responsibility for compliance to the sub. So they act as kind of a burden shifting, quote unquote, in the contract. And then if they're optional, as I mentioned, this is an area where you as a subcontractor have some power to negotiate whether or not that particular clause is included in the subcontract. Because like I said, if it is, then you as the sub are required to comply and will be held liable for any non-compliance. Next slide, please. So going along with what flow down clauses are, it's very important to know what clauses must be flowed down, what might be depending on the contract, and what clauses are optional. And there's two different ways that you can go about identifying which clauses are going to be included or might be included in your subcontract. I'm going to talk about both of them. The first is the FAR SMART matrix. And I wish I could show you and navigate you to the nice little SMART matrix, but it's very easy to find within the FAR website. So once you get there, the first thing that you will need to know is what type of pricing the prime contract or the subcontract will be, whether it's fixed price or cost reimbursement. Then you will need to know what type the prime is, whether it's a supply contract, research and development, service, construction, or commercial items. Now, HHS has all of these types of contracts. I was poking around on sam.gov just this morning just to kind of get an idea of what most of the active ones seem. I saw a few construction, a lot of research and development, and a lot of service. So just to give you an idea, but they do have all of them. So then once you know both of those, and I should mention, it's not necessary that you know either or both of these. You can look at the clauses that are required for all pricing types of supply contracts, or you can look at all of them that are optional in research and development contracts that are either fixed price or cost reimbursement. So you can really customize your search using those filtering options to select clauses that are either A, required, meaning no matter what, they must be included in the subcontract, B, required as applicable, or C, optional. So that can provide some contractors an idea of just what to expect. And I want to point out that it's very important to look at all of them, obviously, but definitely focus on the required as applicable a little bit, because it'll be important to know whether your contract is hitting those thresholds that make that required rather than just optional. Again, going back to that negotiation power, knowing what that is for you. So the benefits of using the SMART matrix, it's super quick. You can select the parameters you want. You can change it with a drop of a hat. You can export the table that it gives you. So you can save it. You can know exactly what clauses have different requirements in it. But the drawback is that this is only for FAR clauses. This is not for HHS specific HHSAR clauses. So it gets you almost all the way, but not quite all the way. Next slide, please. So this is the other method of identifying those FAR flow down clauses, and this is more likely to get you all the way into getting into the HHSAR clauses that are required. It's a little more time intensive, but it pays off by having those HHS clauses right there. So to do this, you'll want to locate the solicitation on SAM or whatever platform you're using to find the solicitation. And within that solicitation, there will be a section for contract clauses, and they'll have the clauses that are applicable to the FAR and the clauses applicable to the HHSAR. Then you can navigate to both the FAR and the HHSAR on your own and identify what parts of those clauses have the flow down. So it's a little more time intensive just reading through the solicitation, finding all the clauses, pulling them yourself, whereas in the Smart Matrix, you can just click on the link to the clause, but it does give you the HHS specific clauses. And I just included some of the language that you may see. The contractor shall insert the following clauses into subcontracts. That would be a required, whatever comes after that would be the required flow down. So those are just a couple ways to identify the flow down clauses so that you as a subcontractor know what to expect. And especially using the Smart Matrix, you can do that for, let's say you know that you usually work with fixed price, either supply or construction contracts. You can go right now without having a prime contract at all, pull those different required as applicable, and optional clauses, start looking through them and getting really familiar with them to then be more prepared when that opportunity to subcontract within one of those comes about. And it makes the prime's life easier, it makes your life easier, it makes everyone's life easier. So would highly recommend spending some time getting familiar with those clauses and with those in the HHSAR as well. Next slide, please. So to finish up, I just want to touch on a few specific clauses within the HHSAR that are required in some instances or just important to note for subcontractors. So the first is for contracts for the design, development, or operating of a system of records. As we all can imagine, the department or HHS and the agencies within it work a lot with personal health information, HIPAA protected information, and the like, and that's all housed in a system of records. So when you as a subcontractor are working on contracts involving a system of records, there is a flow down clause, I've listed it there, that you must comply with the Privacy Act. And it's more than that. You have to notify your employees, and you have to make sure that you and your employees are aware of the requirements in the Privacy Act. So it sounds small, but again, not complying or failing to comply with this can be very costly. So if you are working within a system of records or you regularly work with that, definitely know that this will be a requirement for you. Next slide, please. The next one is the earned value management system, and I just note this because it applies to cost or incentive subcontracts depending on the size. I've listed out the different sizes here. I won't go through them, but the thresholds are 50 million or more, 20 to 50 million, and less than 20 million. So if you're at 50 million or more, you have to have a system that's determined compliance with the American National Standards Institute Standard 748, and that determination of compliance has to be done by HHS. When you're in the 20 to 50 million dollar range, you have to have a system that complies, but there's no specific determination by HHS required. And then if it's valued at less than 20 million, it's up to you whether or not you would like to use an earned value management system. It's basically a risk determination at that point. Next slide, please. So I've mentioned it a few times, but there are a number of clauses in the HHSAR about the Indian Preference Program. I've listed them here. I don't want to go into a ton of detail because it's not a huge part of what HHS does, but if you are a subcontractor within one of these programs, there are a number of requirements that will be imposed on you. So if you know that you may or you might be contracting or performing services on an Indian project, you want to know what these say. When I was on sam.gov, there are a number of active ones at this time, so you'll want to know and consult these. Next slide, please. And then these are just a few small ones to note. The cooperation in EEO investigations, that's required in all HHS subcontracts. It's a required flow down no matter what the contract is. The safety and health flow down is required in those subcontracts involving toxic substances, hazardous materials, or hazardous operations. So kind of a smaller subset. And then the publications and publicity, that's required in all contracts where you as a subcontractor may propose publishing the results of your work. As I mentioned, HHS does a lot of research and development, and so this one can play a little bit more of a bigger role in those when you are researching and opining on new or emerging technologies, health sciences, and the like. So that's all I have. It's very broad overview, but I hope I was able to kind of flag some things that you as a subcontractor should or will want to know. And again, if you have any questions, I'm available. I think Madeline has my contact information.
Yes, thank you so much, Janae, for all of your insights. Thank you for being with us today. As she just said, you can reach out to her or Archisa if you have more questions about the GovSpend platform. So there are their emails right there. We'll be sending out the slides after today's webinar. They'll be on slideshare.net, just like all of our other previous webinars. And then the recording from today will be available on our YouTube channel in about 24 hours or less. So thank you to everyone who participated today. We look forward to seeing you next week, but this concludes the webinar and have a great day.